Tonight on Farage, the budget tomorrow and 5 million public sector workers are expecting quite a good pay rise. But as many have worked from home, I'm going to be asking tonight, do they deserve this pay rise? Protesters everywhere, threats to close the M25 tomorrow, and now a group scaling buildings in London saying we should stop eating meat. Do these protests really do any good? And joining me on Talking Pints, legendary Sun editor Kelvin Mackenzie.
Hello, I'm Polly Middlehurst, and these are your latest GB News headlines. The Queen has cancelled attending a major reception for world leaders at the COP26 Climate Change Summit in Glasgow next week. Buckingham Palace say the 95-year-old monarch has followed doctors' advice to rest and regretfully decided not to travel to the event. It comes after the head of state carried out her first official engagement since her overnight stay in hospital last week. She appeared on screen via a video link from Windsor Castle, delivering an audience to the ambassador from the Republic of Korea. Millions of public sector workers will get a pay rise next year. That's according to the Chancellor. They include teachers, nurses and police officers. Rishi Sunak will announce the change for workers across the country in tomorrow's budget. And that comes after he paused public sector pay increases after heavy borrowing during the pandemic. However, Labour's shadow child poverty minister, Wes Streeting, criticised the latest budget announcements, including the national minimum wage increase.
The minimum wage increase doesn't go anywhere near far enough to compensating people for those losses. In fact, we calculated that even when you take into account the minimum wage increase, once you've factored in the universal credit cut, once you've factored in the national insurance hike, people end up being still about £800 a year worse off. And by definition, these are people on some of the lowest incomes when they go out to work.
The funeral of the Conservative MP Sir David Amess will be held at Westminster Cathedral next month. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the leader of Roman Catholics in England and Wales, will preside over the service on November the 23rd. The Southend West MP was stabbed to death early this month, meeting constituents in a church in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex. The number of patients in hospital with COVID has climbed to its highest level for more than 7 months. A total of 8,693 patients were in hospital on October the 25th. That's according to the latest government figures. However, levels are still well below those seen at the peak of the second wave of coronavirus infections. Sussex police say they're investigating 7 cases of women being injected or spiked on nights out. The reports have all come from Brighton and Eastbourne in the last week. Detectives have said they want to reassure members of the public and will therefore be increasing their patrols in the affected areas. The United Nations has warned the world is on track for a climate catastrophe and that plans to cut emissions still fall far short of what's needed. The organisation's environment programme said even with plans and pledges from countries to cut greenhouse gas emissions in the next decade, the world faces global warming of 2.7 degrees Celsius by the year 2001. You're up to date. I'll be back in an hour.
It's budget day tomorrow, and Rishi Sunak is going to give a pay increase. We don't quite know what it is. We think 3%, could be more, to 5 million public sector workers. And tonight I want to discuss, firstly, can we actually afford it, given the desperate state of our public finances? But secondly, and this may sound unfair, it may sound harsh, but do they actually deserve it? Now, of course, we'll be told about police officers and others that have been in the front line during this pandemic. And I completely and utterly understand that, and I thank many of them for doing a brave job, often in very tough conditions. But many that work in our public sector in this country have not been at work very much during the pandemic. They've been working from home. Whitehall, where our civil service departments are, has been virtually empty, and I tell you what, it isn't too busy this week either. So what you've got are a very large number of people who've been working from home. They haven't had to pay the train fares to get to work. They haven't had to pay for the lunchtime sandwich or even the beer down the pub on a Thursday evening with the gang they work with. Interestingly, many of these people are actually financially better off than they've ever been. And because they work in the public sector, none of them have lost their jobs, none of them are going to lose their jobs, and their pensions are all intact. Compare that to the private sector. And yes, of course, there are some in the private sector that have done very well. Some sectors have done well. But there are a lot of people out there in the private sector who've had a pretty miserable time during the pandemic. The cost of this pandemic has been paid to date by those working in the not public sector. Now, some will argue, as Wes Streeting, Labour MP, just did in our news bulletin, that, well, they need this pay increase because, of course, taxes are going up next year, the cost of living is rising. That's true, but it's true absolutely for everybody. So I think we should seriously be asking, are those that have worked from home been able to save money, whose jobs are safe, are they at this moment in time a priority for a pay rise? And I think it's a very fair and a very reasonable debate. Well, joining me to discuss this, firstly, is Charlie Mullins, founder of Pimlico Plumbers, London's largest independent plumbing company, and Lucille Thirlby, Assistant General Secretary of the FDA, the trade union that represents professionals and managers in public service. Lucille, can I start with you? You know, I'm sure for everybody in the public sector, you know, they're pleased that the Chancellor has taken off the freeze. They're pleased they're going to be getting a pay rise. But do you take my point that there are many, for example, in the civil service, who have worked from home, saved money, have safe jobs, whereas many in the private sector have borne the brunt and the burden of this pandemic?
No, I don't agree with you in the sense of if you look at the public sector pay policy over the last 12 years, actually those public servants have not received pay increases for 10 of those years. So actually, when you look at, if you're comparing the private sector with the public sector, which I'd urge you not to do so, because I think there's completely different rates of pay, established work, and how people operate. The public sector pay pause has only been for 1 year within this last year, which Rishi Sunak set out why that was going to be. Going forward, he believes that the economy isn't in a good place, and therefore it is right that the government removes that pay pause, and it is right that those civil servants and public sector workers receive a pay increase.
OK, but do you take my point that unlike the private sector, you know, these people in the public sector, their jobs are safe, and more importantly, their pensions are safe as well? And at a time with a massive, massive deficit, annual financial deficit, this is a very big bill for the country to pay.
Yeah, but the Chancellor has looked at those figures and has decided that the pay pause needs to be lifted. And the reason for that is that actually all these people who you say have got very safe jobs and so on have actually been delivering public services over the throughout the pandemic, prior to the pandemic. So we've got teachers, we've got nurses, we've got teaching assistants, we've got healthcare assistants, we've got people in the civil service who have delivered the furlough scheme, which have enabled private companies and individuals to retain some income during that period. We have ensured that universal credit hasn't fallen over during that period, and huge amounts of people were put through universal credit in the pandemic. So those services are being delivered and have been delivered effectively.
Fine. No, you've made the case, Lucille, very clearly. Well, Charlie Mullins, you know, the private sector, some elements have done well. You've certainly done very well, and your firm's done very, very well. But overall, is it reasonable, given that the country is frankly skint at the moment, is it reasonable? Can we afford to pay the public sector these increased sums?
No, of course we can't. If you look at it, the public sector, as you said, has not been to work. They've been sitting at home. Their jobs have been safe. How can you possibly pay people for not sort of contributing more to the situation that we've had. Obviously, frontline workers, no two ways about it, they need to have a rise. Most of the civil servants that have sat at home and messed the system up, at borders where they can't get their paperwork and many other things that have gone on, how can you possibly reward them with a pay rise? It's just crazy to think of it. First of all, we can't afford it. And the second thing is, do they deserve it? And the answer is no. Frontline workers all day long.
Okay.
If I can just add this, Nigel, we need to get more sort of working class people and have more of these pay review bodies, independent pay review bodies, unbiased pay review bodies, so that then maybe they can pay or give an increase on production or work performance rather than just across the field. But I'm afraid it'd be disaster if we just hand out money, which we don't have.
So, Lucille, Charlie Mullins' point is that whilst some parts of our public sector have performed admirably during this whole period, there are others, such as the DVLA, which have been on strike, have been working from home, not all of them, but mostly working from home, and where we have a backlog of 50,000 unprocessed HGV applications. I mean, let's be frank, working from home has not been that productive. Is it fair that everybody, on a blanket basis, regardless of, this is the Mullins point, that regardless of performance, that everyone gets a pay rise?
Well, it isn't regardless of performance. Most government departments, there is no pay progression for civil servants. They only get pay increases if they meet performance standards, and they haven't had a cost of living increase for 10 years. So actually, whether Mr. Mullins knows the public services pay policies, I don't know. But what I can assure you is that people have been working from home. Our members have shown an increase in productivity. There is no evidence to show that there is a decrease in that productivity. There is also a very clear evidence that people, although you seem to think that people working from home are just sitting at their desks or doing their washing as other people pontificate, but actually, in reality, people are working really long hours. I've been working since 7 o'clock this morning till 7 o'clock this evening. OK, I've stayed on for a bit longer, but actually,
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no, I just sort of think actually it's a mystery to me why working from home is seen as people not working.
Well, Lucille, you've made the point, you've made the case very clearly. Charlie Mullins, Lucille makes the point that people are just as productive working from home. Do you buy that?
A load of rubbish. There's no evidence that they're more productive. You say there's no evidence that they're less productive, but, let's not kid anybody. The only thing that gets more productive is, the washing gets done, the gardening, the gardening gets done, having a coffee with your friends and all that. There's no way that you can be more productive working from home. You need people around you. They haven't got the paperwork. They haven't got the information that they need. I mean, hence all the problems at the borders where people have been waiting days to get information. And when you ring up civil service now, all they say is, we haven't got the information because people are working from home. Well, I mean, you've got to stop pulling the lead and trying to fool people on that one.
Thank you, both of you, for contributing to this debate. There is, folks, a big divide in this country between the public sector and the private sector, and I think we just saw it on display. Thank you to both of you. Now, protests have become part of our lives, and today, unbelievably, we have a group I'd not heard of before, animal rebellion protesters. Yes, it's not Extinction Rebellion, it's Animal Rebellion now. And they've climbed the outside of the Home Office and the DEFRA building, and their aims, as I understand it, are to stop us eating meat, because meat and dairy produce emits too many greenhouse gases for their liking. And the group described themselves as being anti-speciesist. Well, I haven't got the foggiest idea what that even means. So let's go to Nathan McGovern, who is a spokesman for Animal Rebellion. Nathan, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
What is anti-speciesist when it's at home, please?
So essentially, speciesism is a form of discrimination that privileges the human species above others in the animal kingdom and places us on a pedestal like other forms of oppression.
I see. So you think that by taking direct action, causing a blooming nuisance, putting the police out, disrupting central London to a certain degree. You think somehow this helps your case to make us... And by the way, do you want us to go vegetarian or vegan?
Okay, so just to correct you there, Nigel, we are an organisation that is focused on systematic change. We don't blame and shame individuals like you're insinuating there. We are purely focused on changing systems.
I didn't insinuate that you were doing that against individual people. What I said was you're making a damn nuisance of yourself. And what I'm asking you is your aim for us to be vegetarians or vegans?
So the aim is for a transition to a just and sustainable plant-based food system. That is the terminology that we would use.
I see. So that means vegan, basically.
If that's the term that you would like to use, Nigel, yes, but we use the term just and sustainably plant-based.
So in your ideal world, Nathan, can I have milk in my tea?
If it's plant milk, yes.
Ah, okay, right. And can I eat fish? I mean, if I go out and catch a fish, can I eat that?
Well, we would say no, because we are an anti-speciesist organisation. But again, we're focused on systematic change. We're not focused on individuals.
You know, I tell you what, Nathan, there's one area where I might have some agreement with you. You know, it does actually worry me that we cut down large chunks of the Amazon to produce very low quality beef, to be consumed in very low quality burgers. I do actually question whether that makes sense. But human beings have been eating meat for a very, very long time. There is significant evidence that proteins from fish and meat are not necessarily easily replaced by a plant-based diet without taking vitamin supplements of various kinds, and that actually meat, fish, dairy is part of a healthy, natural, balanced diet. And I think most people in the medical profession would agree with that. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I would disagree with you there. I'd like to know what sources you're citing, as there is an emerging body of evidence that does show that a plant-based diet is healthy for all stages of life, and in some cases is much healthier than a diet that does include animal products.
Pretty boring, though, isn't it?
How do you mean? I mean, I don't think we would classify it as securing the planet for humans, for animals, and for the environment as boring.
Well, I would say the diet sounds very boring. And is at the heart of this, your concerns that we're all going to die very shortly through climate change?
Well, essentially, that is what animal rebellion is. We are bringing attention to the fact that animal agriculture contributes roughly a quarter of all global greenhouse gases, is the leading cause of deforestation in the Amazon, and we cannot have the climate crisis and climate breakdown discussion without mentioning animal agriculture.
But you see, whilst I'm all for minority groups having opinions, and that's fine, I'm not for them attempting to impose them upon everybody else. Reasoned argument is fine, and I'm giving you your chance to make your case, and that's right and proper that you should be able to do that. But let's be frank about it, shall we? 2% of the country is vegan, 5% of the country is vegetarian. You are very much a minority cult, and whilst you're fully entitled to make your arguments and give your views, you're not entitled to disrupt public buildings in London, and God knows what else you've got planned for the future. You're a damn nuisance, and you don't help your cause one little bit by behaving in this way.
Well, you can have that opinion.
I do. And most people do.
Does show,
Nathan, most people do.
Swathes of evidence does show we are experiencing a rising trend of a transition to plant-based proteins and plant-based alternatives. In fact, a think tank, Rethink X, does predict that even with government subsidisation, animal agriculture will not be profitable by 2035, and that is not a long time away. We need to transition to a just and sustainable plant-based food system with the assistance of government subsidy.
And you think, I see, so the taxpayer's going to fund all of this, yeah?
Well, at the moment, the taxpayer is funding £1.5 billion, and that's a conservative estimate of animal agriculture in the UK every year. That £1.5 billion would be much better used and invested in a just and sustainable plant-based food system that will secure the future for humans, animals, and the planet.
Nathan, I don't doubt your sincerity. I don't doubt you do actually believe in this. I think it's a little bit on the edge. I think it's very much a minority sport. But I'll promise you one thing. If you go round disrupting public buildings, you will lose support for your cause and not gain it. But I thank you for coming on the programme. In a moment, and we've got to stick with protest groups, I'm afraid, we will be looking at our friends, Insulate Britain, who've given us notice that they're closing the M25 tomorrow. We'll also go to Harwich. I reported last night on a migrant boat being adrift, in trouble, in the North Sea. We'll find out what the latest is.
On Brazier at 8, Britain's nuclear power programme got a reboot this afternoon, a new way of funding that carves out the Chinese. Also, a return to royal duties for the Queen. A royal watcher tells us about that, plus the latest row over how Netflix depicts the crown, and 32,000 square feet of real estate but no parking. Jeff Bezos unveils his plan for a business park in space. That's Brazier from 8.
All the millions of public sector workers deserve to get a pay rise tomorrow, especially as a lot of them have worked from home and are better off than they were before. That's the question I've been debating. Your reaction to that? Well, John on Twitter says, the biggest problem in the public sector is not pay, but the overstaffing of pen pushers. AJ on Twitter says, what about working class people doing ordinary jobs like lorry drivers? We are left behind. I think, to be fair, lorry drivers have finally caught up. But to think that, you know, up till a few months ago, an HGV driver with a very responsible job was earning 11 quid an hour and having to sleep, you know, on the side of some motorway here or in Europe 3 or 4 nights a week. It's a good job. They have caught up. But there are many in the private sector that have had a miserable time during lockdown, and they seem to have been forgotten by me. Another viewer says, what about civil servants working from home and receiving London waiting? It should be removed. Well, it was there for a reason. And William says, these people who have gone to the office should get the increase. Those who've stayed at home, like the DVLA, should not. I just want to say this because I do get a lot of people from the DVLA that email me because they've not been entirely happy with my coverage of what's been going on down there. Some have gone into the office, but a hell of a lot have not. And in the middle of all this, they had a strike. Is it any wonder we've got this massive backlog for HGV applications, which we so desperately need. Now, last night I covered a story, firstly, about the sinking of a migrant dinghy boat in French waters over the weekend, where 39 were picked out of the sea. And I said to you last night that no UK media organisation was covering the story at all. And I reported last night that a migrant boat was in the North Sea with people on board without any life jackets in poor conditions. And today has been awash with rumours. I believe there's been a recent statement in the last few minutes from the Home Office. Let's go straight to Harwich and let's join GB News' East of England reporter, Amelia Harper. Amelia, it's been a day of rumour and counter-rumour, and we know that the RNLI were out through most of the night looking for people. I also understand there may have been a separate incident from a non-migrant boat. Please bring us up to speed as to what's been happening in Harwich.
Well, Nigel, in pretty much the last few minutes, the Home Office has just updated us on all of the details of this incident. They say that 2 men were rescued. They are both Somali nationals. So this has been confirmed as a migrant crossing incident, and they are now being processed within the immigration rules. And this is pretty much a statement that we've just had about a few moments ago. I've got a statement from the Home Office this afternoon. They say an extensive search and rescue operation for a man reported to have entered the water off the Essex coast concluded. They say we want to thank everyone who responded to this incident. While the investigation continues, they're reminding people, they say, of the extreme dangers of crossing the channel in small boats and the callous disregard for life shown by criminal gangs. They go on and they say we are determined to do everything we can to prevent people dying in the channel. The government's new plan for immigration and ongoing work with the French government, they say, will help us crack down on organised criminals and reform the asylum system to deter people from attempting these deadly crossings. But it was reported that they had been in a small dinghy over a 72-hour journey across the channel. The Home Office has given more details on exactly what happened starting on Monday and is now wrapped up, Nigel. They said on Monday afternoon, Border Force and HM Coast Guard assisted in the rescue of 2 men travelling in a small boat off the coast of Harwich. This is a port town here in Essex. An extensive joint search and rescue operation for an additional man reported to have entered the sea in international waters was carried out. No one was found. That involved Border Force and the RNLI, overseen by the Coast Guard. They said, however, no one was found and the search was concluded at about 2 p.m. today. As I said, the 2 men have been rescued, both Somali nationals. They are being processed as we speak. They go on to say the UK is responsible for search and rescue within its region, which is both UK and international waters. So there we are, Nigel. It has been confirmed as a migrant incident.
Amelia, thank you very much indeed for that. And for those of you that don't know, I was involved directly in a migrant rescue in the Channel last October. 2 men, both Africans, both in the water, one not very far away from the end. And look, you know, I disagree totally with what the traffickers are doing. I disagree with illegal immigration, but we are dealing with human beings, and it's only a matter of time. It looks like one's missing. And by the way, not the Channel, the North Sea, but it's only a matter of time before a lot of lives are lost on one day. And I would be very surprised if that didn't happen between now and Christmas. My What the Farage moment. France threatened Britain once again. This just never, ever seems to end, does it? They are actually threatening delays on goods, yes, unless they get their way with fishing rights, which basically means they want pretty much all the fish in British waters. They are going to go on a go slow. This could begin by the end of this week. If it does, there'll be tailbacks like you can't even believe. So I'm worried about this. There are many that think, well, actually, the French threaten, but they never actually do anything, but they could. But the real threat, I think, the real problem, is potentially to Jersey. Jersey where quite a lot of small French boats that wanted to fish in Jersey's waters, despite not having any historical record of doing so. Jersey, the French have said, they may well cut off the electricity. So we have problems at all levels here with the French. Problems, you know, even the Prime Minister, Jean Castex, you know, is warning us that by Friday, if we haven't come to some sort of agreement on fish, he can't be responsible for what happens. So we're not in a great place on this. And just to remind all of you, I've been making the point, making the case, I've been arguing very, very strongly that we should be, when it comes to energy, we should be self-sufficient. And yet, almost unbelievably, we import nearly 10% of our electricity, not just in Jersey, our electricity on the mainland, nearly 10% of it comes from France via interconnectors. So we've left ourselves through a succession of bad governments and total stupidities. We've left ourselves in a very, very bad place. This particular row is being sparked, of course, overfishing, where the French literally want it all. But at some point, I think Boris Johnson is going to have to stand up very, very firmly against the French government. Now, my other what the Farage moment. Insulate Britain have warned motorists not to use the M25 on Wednesday, not to use the M25, and declared the motorway a site of non-violent civil resistance. The campaign group, an offshoot of Extinction Rebellion, has asked that if drivers do use the road, they reduce their speed to 20 miles an hour. Can you believe this? So they're saying, don't use the motorway, but if you do, only go at 20, because you might it might endanger us. This is due to start at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. I mean, it's simply unbelievable. I don't know what scale this protest is going to be on, but I think the whole thing's absolutely unbelievable. They've also had the cheek to call upon the Highways Agency to enforce a 20 mile per hour speed limit and ask the police to refuse to arrest us. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely nuts. They have said, though, that if their terms are met, emergency access will be maintained. I mean, can you believe these people? So if their terms aren't met, they won't let an ambulance with somebody whose life may be in danger through. These are dreadful people. And as I've said over the course of the last couple of days, one particular woman been arrested 5 times in 6 weeks. Priti Patel, stop talking tough at Tory party conference. Oh, Boris, making a huge laugh and a joke about these crusties. Just get these people out of harm's way. And if that means taking them to court and keeping them in prison and allowing the rest of us to get on with our lives, that would be, in my view, at least a very good thing. Now, joining me in a moment on Talking Pines is the former legendary editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. It's my favourite time of the day. The GBNews pub is open. It's great. And joining me for Talking Pints tonight is former editor of The Sun newspaper, Kelvin Mackenzie. Kelvin, welcome.
Welcome.
To Talking Pints. Good to see you. I don't know where we start with you, really. We've got controversy. We've got extraordinary Big Dipper ups and downs. A long career in media. With some very big highs and some lows.
Shocking lows.
I mean, riding high in April, shot down in May. But I understand you're going to put all of this in a book.
I am. For next May.
Yep.
100,000 words.
Yep.
In which I emerged poorly. And somebody said to me, "Isn't there something you could do about that? You did write it, didn't you?" How does the others emerge? Rupert emerges wealthy, but with question marks, and some of his colleagues get some question marks as well. But so I expect it'll all end up in the High Court, which will be fantastic.
When you were running The Sun and you were the editor from 81 to 94.
Yep.
So a long time. Mm-hmm. In what was then a very big selling newspaper. What was it selling at its peak?
4.3, 4.4, 4.5, massive.
Million.
Very, very influential.
Yeah, and the most read paper in British boardrooms. I remember that statistic. People wanted to know what The Sun was saying, where they were going. No internet.
No internet.
Which
no social media.
No social media, which younger viewers won't believe. But I mean, the newspapers were really powerful, weren't they?
They were powerful, and I think in a way the editor didn't know it because it was a desk job. You come in at 9 in the morning, you go at 9 at night. You had no sense of what effect you might be having, for instance, in politics. The one person who did understand this was Rupert Murdoch. The Sun was enormously successful commercially. Selling a lot of papers meant selling a lot of advertising. Mm-hmm. But he also enjoyed the kind of aspect of the power of, for instance, being helpful to Margaret Thatcher or to anybody else.
You were a paper, a red top, page 3, all the rest of it, with a big working class readership.
Massive working class. Yeah.
Encouraging them to vote for a radical Conservative party led by Margaret Thatcher. And I think it was, was it in 1992 when you put the headline up, "It's the Sun what won it"?
Yep.
Do you believe that?
Well, a bit of breast beating never hurt anybody, does it? I wouldn't have liked to have written "It's the Sun what lost it." I'm not sure really. Kinnock really lost it. I mean, he was absolutely hopeless. That guy. He was Jeremy Corbyn without the hair. He was a disaster. I mean,
let's have a look at this. This was your front page the day of the election in 1992. If Kinnock wins today, will the last person to leave Britain please turn out the lights? I mean, I've got to tell you, in terms of humour, that's a hell of a front page.
And I'll accept the compliment.
It's no, I mean, look, you were good at it. I mean, some of it was very controversial. Gotcha, after the Belgrano sunk, was very controversial. Mm-hmm. I think you withdrew it from later editions, didn't you? Or is that not true?
Yeah, no, I did. But actually, that was a mistake. I mean, the reality of this was war. And they were going to attack us. We attacked them. And it was right that we sank their ship, because if we hadn't sunk their ship, they definitely would have sunk ours. And in fact, as we know, they killed many of our people on Sheffield and other destroyers.
And Kelvin, as a boss, I mean, I don't think you'd last very long these days with modern HR. You were a complete tyrant.
Yes, that was the enjoyable aspect of the job.
What, big a tyrant?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, as you well know, absolute power is absolutely delicious, isn't it? So, yes, I totally agree. If I did any of that, I'd be the one that would be let go, not any of the staff. And it was quite wrong, but actually I quite enjoyed it, to be honest.
Do they still speak to you?
Yes, unfortunately they do. They keep in touch and asking whether the cheque is still heading their way. The reality of it was that you thought you were doing the right thing by chastising them or praising them or doing whatever. None of that is possible now. The best thing that can happen, unfortunately, is actually not to talk to your staff. So when I went into commercial life, I decided that I would be in employment tribunals all day long if I ever talked to anybody. So the idea was I just used to shout at the finance director. And he seemed to enjoy that, and that made me feel better. But at least we weren't going to get ourselves
so
in a lot
of layer in the middle, really.
Absolutely, and that is what happens everywhere now. Nobody is going around saying, "Why did we do that? That just cost us 10 grand, or that cost us that contract in Malaysia. Why did that happen? Are you an idiot or what?" All that has gone, and that may be a good thing, but it has disappeared. But one of the aspects of it that's happened is that you end up now in the publishing business where you can't, where if some I'll just say a lady for the sake of argument, had just come out of Oxford and she said, I don't think we should be publishing that book about Nigel Farage, or I don't think we should be publishing that book about Kelvin Mackenzie. Some quivering chief executive, right, said, you're quite right, we won't publish it. Rather than say, look, I'm not interested in your views. I couldn't care less whether you work for us or not. Let me make
It's the corporates, isn't it? It's the corporates. You know, the woke, the real minority, you know, send 25,000 emails to a marketing department. They go, oh my God, everybody hates us.
Well, GBNews has suffered some of it, hasn't it?
In the early days, I think we are getting
well,
back.
It's when you dumped Andrew Neil, everything started turning out all right, didn't it?
Well,
suddenly the media buyers all came rushing in saying, well, you got rid of Andrew, we must remember to take some advertising.
I can't claim responsibility for that one, Kelvin. I wasn't involved. I'm a mere presenter here, you know, but enjoying it, I have to say. And you know, it's a new media venture, and that is an exciting thing.
It is, yeah.
To be part of.
And tough at the beginning.
And, of course, inevitably tough. If the high was 92, and I guess that was the height of really what you did as editor and your power and that front page that all of us that were alive at the time will never forget. You know, the big low. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking it was Liverpool, but would that be right?
No, that would be right.
I have attracted a fair degree of opprobrium over the last few years. I was a devil incarnate. I dared take on the establishment on what was a settled view, and so necessarily you're mad and bad for doing that. But I've never sort of quite. I think the mayor of Liverpool, Joe Anderson, the one that in the end had to stand down, he did say.
Why did he have to stand down?
Well, I think there was all sorts going on. Yes. But I'm not sure we can say so at this moment in time. He once said that Nigel Farage wasn't welcome in Liverpool, but that was just him. And I'm sure if I turned up there today, in a bar tonight in Liverpool, I might do okay. But you're kind of still 30 years on. You are the ultimate pariah in Liverpool. Just tell us what actually. I mean, basically, the Hillsborough tragedy. For those that don't know this story, the Hillsborough tragedy, the victims, they felt or were made to feel that you'd insulted them.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I've explained this till I'm blue in the face.
Yeah, well, let's hear it.
They don't want to listen. So all that happened was there was a piece of agency copy from, some freelancers in Sheffield, very well known. They come up with a story which said that senior officers blamed the Liverpool fans for Hillsborough. OK. Why wouldn't I believe that? When our political editor, walking down Whitehall that afternoon, bumps into the private secretary to Margaret Thatcher, who tells exactly the same story to Trevor Kavanagh, the political editor.
Sort of corroboration.
Yeah, corroborated it. Why wouldn't I believe that? Why wouldn't I believe it? And by the way, I wasn't the only one to run. The Liverpool papers ran the story as well.
So the story was a crowd surge caused by people who didn't actually have tickets.
There was a bit of that, and there was kind of other allegations that were made. They were horrible allegations, OK? But this was coming from senior police officers. It wasn't the Sun having sent out some investigative reporters. It wasn't even our reporters. So why wouldn't I believe it? If it had been about Jimmy Savile, senior police officers had said X, Y and Z about Jimmy Savile, I would have believed that as well. And so the Liverpool fans, as it turned out, the whole story was completely made up by the cops. And it was made up by the cops in order to actually deflect the mistakes that they had made, or perhaps one officer had made, or a series of officers had made, right, to deflect what they had done. However, Liverpool fans still waiting for somebody, so 97 are now dead, are still waiting for somebody to be charged and found guilty. And so there is nobody to blame, so they might as well blame the editor of The Sun. And
it stuck.
And it stuck, and it's still there today, and it will still be there. For instance, I get from Liverpool fans saying that they are going to have a bigger party than when Margaret Thatcher died when I die. That is one of their favourite. That's their favourite. It's a disgrace. But some of the stuff, threatening, we're going to murder you, we're going to stab you, we're going to do this.
Do you still get that?
Oh, yeah, I still get that. So it is quite shocking, the level of abuse. And so one of the reasons I'm pleased with the online harms bill is because, with a bit of luck, this will now stop.
Does it bother you?
If you ask me, do I want it to stop? And do some members of my family kind of get caught up in the kind of, as you well know, get caught up in the shadow of it all? Do I want it to stop? Yes, I do. Right? I'd like it to stop tomorrow. Do I think it's going to stop? No, I don't. It's something I'll just have to live with.
Yeah. It's whether it's because you've made a mistake, or whether it's because you were misled, or even whether it's because you had a misjudgment, to still be paying a price for it 30 years on is pretty tough.
Well, I don't accept that it was a misjudgment.
No,
I don't accept it was a mistake.
I said it could be, but, you know.
Yeah, it's for the other side to say that, but I don't accept that.
Fair enough. After that, you continued, you did remarkable things. I mean, where we first came in touch, you were running TalkSport Radio. You took it to remarkable places. And I'm grateful to you because you gave me my sort of first real chances as a young MEP. And I'd go on with James Whale and all sorts of people. And you know, I am grateful to you for giving me a chance to get out there and do that stuff. And that was a huge success. TalkSport was a huge success. And you've had all sorts of commercial ups and downs, and that's the way that life in the commercial world is. But you were back writing columns.
Yep. I was
back writing columns.
Yep.
Back doing what Kelvin does best. And what Kelvin does best, I think, is he's quite good at assessing where the public are on stuff. Quite good at assessing whether it's Middle England or whatever it is. And probably 7 or 8 times out of 10, Kelvin gets it right. Twice out of 10, hopeless. But generally, you're good at getting it right.
But remember, I'm not trying to get it right. I'm just saying what I think.
Yeah, but what you think has the reason that you did well at The Sun, you struck that chord. But suddenly, after all these years...
I get fired.
At 70...
Yeah, fired.
Sacked at 70.
As I said to Rebecca Brooks, said, this is a fantastic day. She said, oh, yes, in what way is that? I said, well, anybody can get fired at 40 or 50. I said, sacked at 70. That really is great. So I get fired. I get fired because I don't know that Ross Barkley's not white. I didn't know, and by the way, the sports editor didn't know. Rebecca Brooks, she didn't know. She didn't know what ball is for football, right? Nobody knows. Ross Barkley, grandfather, turned out to be Nigerian. Why does this matter? Because I said I hadn't seen anybody as stupid as Ross Barkley, right? The last time I'd seen anybody stupid as Ross Barkley was Guy the Gorilla. Well, directly you use that kind of terminology in relation to somebody who has black blood inside them, then you are in trouble. But who on earth knew that? No Chelsea fan. You get your viewers now to say who knew that Ross Barkley had this about them. And would I have written it if I had to? Anyway, there's no ifs and buts about that. Along comes Murdoch. He said, he's got to go. Boom, out the door. And that's that.
Has Rupert gone woke? Because, I tell you what's amazing.
Yeah.
Yesterday's Sun newspaper.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you looked at it. It was
not if I'm looking for stories, I don't.
Wall to wall, backing Boris, backing the aims of COP26. Yeah. Prince Charles is writing in the Sun. Yeah. I mean, here he is. Look, here's Prince Charles in yesterday's Sun, and he suddenly now appears to be the sort of Sun's green ambassador.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting to have the world a better, cleaner, safer place, but there are pretty serious questions about wind energy and the sheer cost of these ludicrous heat pumps that Boris and the Prince want us to have. I mean, as I say, you got cancelled.
Yeah.
And
well, actually, I got more than cancelled. I got fired.
Yeah. Well, it amounts to more or less the same thing. Don't worry, it's happened to me. It happens to many people.
Well, it may be happening to you after the show.
Well, having you on could do it, I don't know. But no, Kelvin, where are we? I mean, free speech is free speech. It should never incite hatred or violence, and we all understand that. But free speech is, I can say what the hell I think about you. You can say what the hell you think about me. And if we meet in a week's time, I might have a drink with you. Because that's what we do as free human beings. But right through the education system, all the way through, we're suddenly being told, not that I disagree with your point of view, but I respect your right as a human being to have. I think you're an idiot, but I respect your... We're now saying, no, that person should be stopped from speaking. Are we going to be able to turn this around? Where do we go with all of this in the future?
The answer's no to that.
Is it?
Yeah. I'm afraid the tide is gone out on that argument. And if you take a paper like The Sun, made up of some pretty good people, what they've decided is, and I don't blame Murdoch for this at all. The Sun loses money. When I was there, we were making a fortune. There wasn't any competition.
Did you make a fortune?
Did I make a fortune at The Sun? No, I didn't. No.
Why not?
I was very... Rupert had a kind of parsimonious attitude towards pay, and what he understood was that the job was so good he didn't have to pay anybody to do it. Is the truth.
And you love doing it anyway.
And I like doing it anyway. Yeah, I like doing it anyway. After 23 hours out of the day, you felt a bit tired, but after that, you were fine. And so money was not the driving force. But the Sun now loses money. Therefore, he doesn't want to have a problem with something that's losing money. In New York, he's got Fox News. It's in trouble morning, noon and night. They don't give a stuff. By the way, the thing's making $1.5 billion a year. He will take as much trouble as he likes. So Rupert very cleverly has decided, telling his management, I don't want a problem when I wake up in the morning.
Right. So turning this around is going to be tough, yeah?
I say it's impossible.
That's very pessimistic.
I know. But you see, if you get something like, I don't know, GBNews, and if Ofcom continues to have a more relaxed attitude towards free speech, the ability... they had a choice on Meghan Markle, and actually what they did was they doubled Piers' money. Because it must be the... See, when I get slung out, nobody wants to know me. When Piers gets slung out, he gets 50 million quid for 3 years' money. How did that happen?
I don't know. Kelvin, finally, has it all been worth it?
It has been worth it, and it will continue to be worth it.
There you
go. Not the end of it.
There you go. Not the end of Mackenzie. Gosh, you have all been warned. That was Kelvin Mackenzie on Talking Pints. It's the end of the programme. There isn't long left, but it is. Yes, it's Barrage the Farage, where you send in your questions, which I do not get a sight of, and Kelvin may help me out with some of this. Adrian asks, do you think these minority protest groups should go and demonstrate in the countries that are the main contributors? Yes, I think they should all go to the wet market in Wuhan where they eat bats and tell them not to eat meat. And I absolutely think they should be in Beijing telling the Chinese to start, not to build 100 new coal-fired power stations this year. They wouldn't find their liberties lasting too long. And I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't be free to say what they think, but stop wrecking everybody else's lives. Alan asks me, where do these migrants get thousands of pounds from to pay the traffickers to cross the channel? Well, it varies, but I can tell you...
Tries very hard, and she's frustrated at every turn, either by left-wing lawyers or even by the left of her own party. And
human rights legislation?
Human rights legislation, yes, but I don't... It's very, very fashionable to bash Priti Patel, and I know from all the tweets I get that they really want to sling her out, but I don't think... I'm not sure who on earth you put in
Kelvin
there.
Stands up for her. I wouldn't mind if she was honest with us and said, I can't deal with this problem given the rules I've got. She still pretends she can. Never mind. We're done. It's over for the evening. Colin Brazier is with you any minute now. Let's have a look at the weather.
Hello, we've got some very unsettled weather across the UK over the next few days. Heavy rain at times with Met Office weather warnings in place. Windy too. And those winds are coming in from the southwest, so it is very mild, as you can see on the pressure pattern. Now, we're keeping an eye on this weather front here because that's going to give some persistent rain through the next few days. The risk of some flooding, weather warnings are in place across northern England, southern Scotland and Wales. That weather front is currently across Northern Ireland and Scotland as we go through Tuesday evening into Wednesday, gradually sinking its way southwards. A lot of cloud in the sky, winds in from the southwest and very mild for the time of year. These are your overnight temperatures into Wednesday, more typical of what we would see through the daytime at this stage in October. So through Wednesday morning then, it's southern Scotland, northern England that sees the brunt of the rain. Will be quite persistent, I think, through the day here. And that just allows those totals to build up, so the risk of some difficult travelling conditions. A lot of cloud elsewhere, a few breaks in that cloud to the east of the Pennines, across southeast England as well. Some brighter skies later across the northwest with 1 or 2 showers, but highs of 18 degrees, very mild for this stage of October. As we go through Wednesday evening then, that rain gradually sinks into Wales and pushes its way a little bit further south with some very strong winds on that. We could see gusts of 30 to 40 miles an hour at times. Another rain warning then comes into force for Wales through Thursday as we see that rain starting to become more persistent here. Still very, very mild though across the bulk of the country. A little bit cooler across the northwest of Scotland as we see that cooler, fresher air starting to push its way in here. But as we go through Thursday, more of the same for western areas. Do take care if you are travelling because there will be some difficult driving conditions out there. We're expecting that rain to persist through much of the day. Elsewhere, some brighter skies. And as we go through Friday and into the Halloween weekend, it stays unsettled and turns just that little bit cooler. Take care for now. Bye-bye.